Whoa, what's up everybody? Long time no video like this, and I've got a new light that I hope will illuminate my face pretty well. You know, I hope you can see my face. I could probably turn it up just a little, just a little. Wow, we have reached December. Oh my goodness, my favorite calendar flip of the year. You know, may not get any more opportunities this month. You never know. So, I've got a lot to talk about. I was somewhere that you can probably imagine, somewhere very predictable that I go, you know. Would be there more often, but unfortunately I have to live here. Um, it's a long story. And so I haven't been able to make any videos at all because of where I was. And unfortunately, you know, went through Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and got bombarded with deals from all kind of places. All kind of places. I would just get bombarded with these deals. You know, last day of this deal, last day. And it's like not just Black Friday, but the whole entire like Cyber Week or whatever you call it, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, you know, the days leading up to it, the days following, and you know, just the whole last part of November. And something very shocking or unusual happened while I was there. Unfortunately, somehow or another on November the 20th, I started vomiting again. And it's just the weirdest thing. It's like I got through so many years without ever throwing up. I'm pretty sure like roughly 2017 through 24, or you know, almost a decade, where a long period of time went by and I don't recall ever vomiting. Certainly not uncontrollably the way I did on May 2nd, and now again on November the 20th, Transgender Day of Remembrance. Um, And it's just the weirdest thing. It's like, I don't know why. Why 2025 is just hitting me in the stomach like this. And, you know, like I was talking about how God speaks to me, I believe, and no one can convince me otherwise, you know, in various ways like that, and has most of my life. I feel like God speaks to me. And it just so happened to be like, you know, it was a very similar situation to May 2nd. And I was like, you know, laughing about, it's like I have so little to do over there that all I can really think about is just laughing about, you know, fictional characters and even real people, unfortunate enough to be filmed at that moment, vomiting and just laughing about, you know, vomit. And I guess, you know, the puke emoji kind of it characterizes the year 2025 for me. Because while I may still end the year without any colds, knock on wood. Hopefully this scratchy throat is kind of my imagination, because it would be my first December cold since before the pandemic. Um, but my throat's just a little bit raw, and hopefully that's just all it'll be. But I don't know why, you know, I've just been vomiting in 2025, and also having days where I feel the urge to vomit but don't actually do it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, why am I suddenly feeling nauseous now that I'm making videos about vomit and how funny it is? And it's almost like God is trying to tell me how funny it isn't. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like, you know, God speaks to me in that way, that it's like, you know, not with an actual voice, but by showing me through life events, you know, what exactly I needed to hear, but probably already knew it. Um, so 2025, I don't know why, you know, but I've just been having these days where I'm just so nervous, you know, just out of the blue. And it's just weird, just like it's very much like what happened on May 2nd. It's like I started the day just feeling a bit of anxiety about, well, on May 2nd, it was about leaving. Um, and about, you know, how historically it's just a bad day in my life. But then, very similar thing happened on November the 20th. You know, just a number of bad thoughts in my head, and also, you know, having spent the previous day, you know, watching videos about puke, laughing about puke, you know, laughing about, now I can add Loopy Cooper, you know, another cartoon character to the list, you know, searching for videos of real people vomiting, you know, to get a reference of what that would be like in real life. In May, it was primarily Cedric, and you know, it just keeps adding on to it. It's almost like the more you pay attention to something, the more that it happens, almost. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way that I can't explain. I guess a logical explanation is that, me thinking about vomit, just makes it more likely to happen, because it's almost like, well, I mean, so much of it starts in the brain. I mean, your brain kind of tells your stomach to vomit. So the more you think about puke, the more likely it is to happen because you're already thinking about it. That's a logical explanation. But the religious explanation is, of course, God trying, punishing me or trying to get me to see that it isn't funny, and trying to, give me negative memories so that I don't laugh so hard about it. And, especially involving real people, because I honestly can't see why God would punish me so hard for laughing about Cedric and Lars or Angelica and Loopy. I mean, I had, like, this is how much it was on my brain. Like, I had literally, had video clips. I was going to make a video very soon and have clips of actual people, but I don't like to do that. That I had clipped or saved, and have, like, the cartoon characters vomiting and then show what it would be like in real life. And, but what ended up happening is I felt so badly, after throwing up, like God was slapping me or something, that I literally deleted those things off of my phone for good and said, forget that. And I thought about privatizing all my videos, or a lot of my videos about the throwing up stuff. And the song, I just made that song and released it about Loopy, and how funny it is that she threw up in Egghead, whether or not people recognize it as such, as a puke scene that it was. And, I was going to make like I don't know how to explain it, like a collage, of pictures, like in AI, because you can perfect a cartoon image now with AI to where, like if it was a crappy 2D cartoon or stop motion, you can make it more like if it was modern CGI or claymation or something. Make it look so much better. And so I was going to have like HD versions of, the still frames of all these antagonists, as I call them, vomiting. Though some are more evil than others. I mean, let's face it, Loopy and Cedric are two different types of antagonist. You know, but and I started to say, that there usually is a more normal version of their name. And if Loopy was the protagonist, she'd probably be Lucy or Loopy, Lupe, or something like that. But, a strange name gives you a clue that someone is an antagonist, though not always. And like Marley, in Rugrats, she's somewhat of an antagonist, like a one-time antagonist, because a name like Molly or even Charlie for girls, would be something she'd be more likely to have, were she a protagonist, and the fact that she covers more of her body. So yeah. So I was going to have like this cool collage of all these pictures of the antagonists the moment that they vomited, or as close as you can get to it. As much proof as you can get that they vomited, however discreet they may have been. And I was going to have maybe some clips of real people, real kids vomiting, which I haven't figured out why a lot of times those videos just go away for no reason. It's like for years you'll be able to access them, then suddenly somebody takes them down despite how many millions of views they had. So anyway, decided to, try to stop talking about that, because it's like the weirdest thing. It was just deja vu to May 2nd. Just started vomiting because, I was nervous, and, my mom just doesn't, both of my parents, they're really bad about thinking, that they can wear me down. It don't matter what the subject is. If they want me to do something and I say no, they don't believe that no really means no. Nobody in my life seems to respect my wishes. Everyone seems to think they can wear me down about everything, no matter what it is. And it just gets so frustrating, because it's like, I wish I could be more assertive, but then I don't want to be a bitch and all that. But, just today I won an argument with my dad not to go with him somewhere, which is how I'm able to make this video. But my mom, I go over there and I tell her, Mama, I feel nervous. I don't know why. Because we were going to go watch some people sing at a church. And perhaps a part of me knew that what I was doing wasn't right with God, making all these videos about vomit and all that, and laughing about them, and laughing at real people vomiting in particular. And so, very similar to May 2nd, just was having all these racing thoughts in my head. And I don't know why. I think the primary reason, and this is what my mom believes, is that I'm OCD about the bathroom. I have this soul-crushing fear of messing myself, which luckily never happens. And it's like if I go to the bathroom and it's higher on the Bristol chart, I know that's TMI, but if it's a higher Bristol rating, I start to get anxiety, and it's sort of like a catch-22. It exacerbates the problem, because it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. How am I gonna get rid of all this and not have it, cause problems for me in a place with subpar bathrooms or inadequate bathrooms for whatever reason. And so that anxiety, the bathroom anxiety, is really just controlling my life. And this OCD about, oh my God, my life would end if I did, well, you can imagine, which luckily never happens, praise God. But it's like, so my mom dismissed it as bathroom anxiety, and she thought that the reason I was feeling that way was, because I was afraid, because this church where we're going kind of has old toilets that don't flush well. And when you have a large group of people, demanding those toilets, it's like, what if it's occupied when I absolutely need it? So I don't know. She thinks it's all bathroom anxiety, which I've had my whole life, since I was potty trained. And so, she thought that's what was making me vomit. But what happened was, it's like she doesn't take no for an answer. Sort of like my dad, it's very hard to convince anyone that I mean no. And so I told her, look, Mom, I'm not hungry. I went out a few times today and it was not exactly as solid as I prefer, because my preference is for the lower numbers on the Bristol chart, because I've always had this motto, you can try again later, but you can't uncrap your pants. Much rather be constipated than the other way. Because what the absolute worst thing that could ever happen to a female in my mind is. So I was telling her that I didn't want to eat. I'm not hungry. Please don't try to force me to eat something. But she insists. She thinks that you have to eat, even if it's just a few crackers. And so she fixes me this big old glass of milk and some peanut butter and raspberry jelly. Normally I buy the Stripes, the tried and true grape jelly that she makes fun of. Peanut butter and jelly. But so here I am eating this sour raspberry jelly that I didn't ask for on a piece of bread, and trying to force it down like this, and force the milk down. And I sat down and I thought to myself, hopefully I'll be okay. But then my stomach just didn't stop hurting, just like on May 2nd. I was like, oh my God, if I do not get off this couch now, I'm going to vomit everywhere, just like those unfortunate people that I've been laughing about all year long, and those cartoon characters. And part of it was, I was having racing thoughts, and some of those racing thoughts were these clips of these cartoons and of real people vomiting, and a Family Guy and the dog in the huge fountain of puke, Brian. So, I go to the bathroom, and naturally your gut instinct is I have to pull my pants down if my stomach hurts, which is why I never lean over the toilet like my mom would prefer. So I sit on the toilet, and there she is putting on her makeup, and I just grab the trash can, and I say, oh my God, I don't feel well, and I just start throwing up in it. She wasn't thrilled with that, but better than all over the floor. And it's like, I thought I was okay, then a few minutes later started throwing up again, and to the point where I was like dry heaving, just like in May. But I mean, vomiting uncontrollably is just not just typical behavior for me. And I thought maybe I should go to the doctor. I talked to my dad on the phone, and I said, maybe we should go to the doctor. And he's like, well, it costs me money when you go to the doctor, and you haven't met your deductible. And I said, but this is not normal. You people just don't vomit all of a sudden at 42, after almost a decade of not vomiting at all. Like, certainly not like that, not to the point of dry heaving. And, I was also having diarrhea, just like in May, luckily, no messing or anything like that. But, it's like every time I go to my mom's house, as much as I like to be with her, I just always seem to have a moment of anxiety that has me puking and crapping, and, not on myself, but, just a lot. I know that's TMI. My dad told me it was TMI on the phone. And it's like, well, it is what it is, I have to tell somebody. I have to do something about it, because vomiting is not normal. It's really not normal for anyone, but certainly not, healthy as a horse adult who hardly ever does it, ordinarily. But I don't know, 2025 has just been a pukey year. And so, I don't know, I just kind of second guessed myself and thought maybe God is spanking me again. Yeah, it's been about 6 months since the last time. So, yeah, and I just feel like God speaks to me. God speaks to me. Whether people want to believe it or not, God speaks to me. So, yep. And, it's like people may not want to hear it, but I mean, God exists. God is real. God is not, I'll never be an atheist. And, like, I don't know if I told this story before, but I'll tell it again, probably repeating myself. But one time, and the other thing is, after vomiting, it's like I felt heavy-hearted and sad. Like I was at that church thing, and it's also not normal for me to tear up just because of beautiful music. But hearing this beautiful Christian music, in light of everything that had just happened with me, vomiting to the point of dry heaving, my mom noticed that I was tearing up. Yeah, I wasn't just crying all the way like, oh, like a baby, all over my face, but I was just like getting teary-eyed, because of the beautiful music, in addition to everything that had just happened. You know what I'm saying? It just makes you heavy-hearted and sad when you either know you're getting a cold or you puke your brains out. And just makes you heavy-hearted and sad, because that's not supposed to be my life. That's not, the superhero that I see myself as being. And, it's like I didn't avoid getting pregnant and having children so that I could puke for other reasons at 42. So yeah, anyway, I was talking about how, God speaks to me. And one time I was like, I got so teary-eyed because, I couldn't remember Bob Dole's Running Mate from 96. There are just some memories that don't stick because they don't really concern your life for very long. And Bob Dole's Running Mate, yeah, was Jack Kemp, but I couldn't think of that because obviously I didn't vote until 4 years later. Or, no, it was 8 years later, I think. Yeah, I had to wait till I was 21. So I voted for Bush's second term, not his first term. But if I would have been able to vote, I'd have voted for Bob Dole, like my parents. And his running mate was Jack Kemp one time. And I couldn't think of that, had to look it up. So looked it up. And what I found about him was that he had died on, was it May 2nd? His death date was May 2nd. Both of them are dead. And that made my eyes burn because of the fact that May 2nd has that significance of being the day that I was absent from school because of a cold. And so when I look up Jack Kemp and find that he died on May 2nd, I want to say like 12 years later or something. So I guess it would have been a Saturday, because when you're 12, you're one day over an exact number of weeks or something, like 626 or something like that. Yeah, it's 4,383 days and a dozen years. So, so Jack Kemp died on May 2nd. Bottom line, Jack Kemp's death date happened to be May 2nd, the date with that significance of me having a cold, making that whole video about it. And the reason that made me teary-eyed, because he died of cancer. And I felt like what God was communicating to me at that moment was that while I'm obsessed with having a cold in the 7th grade, there are people dying of cancer on the exact same date that I remember for that obsessive reason. And it was like, God had communicated something with me. And so it just had me teary-eyed, and it was like, I hope I don't get emotional, but, it's just things like that. It's like, they're just too coincidental, there's a logical explanation, but, it's almost like it just can't help but be. It's almost like, I don't know, God knew that I needed to see that someone had died of cancer on a date that I'm obsessed with because I was absent from the 7th grade in 97. I think it was like 12 years later in 2009 that Jack Kemp was dying of cancer. So, anyway, I just feel like God communicates with me, and, that God was like punishing me or something. And it just so happened to be the day that, it's almost like I knew I'd be in the house of God, and, having all these thoughts in my head about, thinking vomit was so funny, and, making all these videos, like making fun of a cartoon character. I mean, I can't imagine, God being angry about me laughing at a cartoon character. But I guess where it crosses the line is when I like to watch, actual videos of real people vomiting, just to have a reference as like, this is what it would look like in real life. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not going to necessarily show it like this in the cartoon, but this is what the real world equivalent would be. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure a lot of people do that. Look up something in real life to get a mental reference of how it should or could be in the cartoon if you could animate it yourself. So, anyway, so yeah, enough about that. I spent way too long, 20 minutes talking about that. I finally want to get down to the unboxing, so I'll go ahead and post this part.